case study part I might leave, or I might just take some extra lectures sometime, just for the sake of people who are interested. It need not even be part of the NSEM. All right, so we'll get going with events. So what we saw about the callbacks was that, so we are talking about various streams in which different kernels, different memcopies can happen in parallel. And sometimes we want a callback on the host that certain events, certain set of actions or tasks have completed on the GPU. So that was more like communication within a stream, because then some task I want to start only after a particular earlier task has completed, right? So that can be done directly on the GPU by pushing those tasks T1 and T2 sequentially in the same stream. So automatically those are going to happen in sequence. However, if you want the CPU to know about whether a certain task in GPU is over, that can be done using the callbacks. There are other situations where you want to communicate across streams. Like we had the global barrier discussion across two kernels which are pushed to the different streams. But there might be other kind of tasks which might be there in streams which might not have a computational aspect associated. For example, if I have to communicate that when a particular memcopy is over in one stream, at that time I want to initiate another memcopy in the other stream. Now this memcopy is not really something which is going to be a computational part. It is just a data copying. So we don't get any control over what can be done as soon as this particular memcopy is over, etc. So in such cases, this communication across streams can be nicely done using something called as events. Creating events is rather simple. You just have event create command, and the type is CUDA event underscore T. And we have, let's say, two events, start and stop, which can be now used at different places in the program to make sure that those events get generated when the stream completes execution of all the tasks prior to them, right? But as we said, these are across streams. That means that the event is going to get generated in one stream, and that is going to be kind of captured in the other stream, right? So this communication across streams has to happen. So the event needs to now have some association with the stream, and that syntax we are going to see now. So just to summarize, callbacks is the synchronization or communication within a stream, whereas events is for synchronization or communication across streams. So let's do that. We have two streams, stream A and stream B, and I have one event created. All right, so this is the creation of the streams and the events. I have one kernel K1 going into stream A, and then another kernel K2, which is also going into the stream A, and third kernel K3, which is going into another stream. Right? What I have is in between K1 and K2, I perform an event record, which records a particular event into a particular stream. So as far as stream A is concerned, there are three tasks or three entities pushed into it. One is K1, then the event, and then K2. In absence of, okay, so that is one part. The second stream is going to have some sort of a wait event. So wait event is some activity which needs to be performed. What does it say? It says that I am going to push this wait activity into stream B. The activity is associated with the event, right? So this event variable was pushed into stream A. And that is how stream A and stream B are connected using this event. So there is a record and then there is a wait event. The record is at the source, the wait event is at the destination. This 0 is for the some reserved flags. After that, I have pushed K3 to stream B, and therefore, what does this make sure? Any suggestions? What would be
K3 happens after K1.
K3 happens after K1. Okay. Stream B starts only after A completes. Stream B starts after A completes. Sure. So I understand that. Okay. Okay. So let's look at both the answers. The first answer was K3 happens after K1. Right. And the second answer which Agnik has suggested is that stream B starts only after A completes, and A has both K1 and K2. It says stream B starts after the event. Okay. Okay. So the third answer which Kshitij has given matches with the first answer, but Chagnik's answer seems to be a little different. So let's understand this. Here we are saying that K1, then event happens, then K2, and then the second stream is waiting for this event to happen, and only after that K3 is going to start, which means that K3 and K2 might execute in parallel. As far as K1 and K3 are concerned, there is a sequentiality, which means that the event is, although it is a synchronization across these two streams, the synchronization is only between K1 and K3. But as far as K2 and K3 are concerned, those can happen in parallel. Does that seem reasonable, Chagnik? Or maybe you meant probably the same, but you probably wrote it in a different way. Okay, good. Yeah, so that is what K3 won't execute until K1 is over. And note that these are two different streams, right? And still we are able to coordinate amongst them. So any other concerns, questions on this part? All right. So this is very similar to our callback example, where callback within a stream on the CPU is going to happen exactly between the tasks before the callback and the tasks after the callback, right? And it is blocking, which means that the callback must be over before any task after the callback is going to happen. So in a similar way, in this case, the event is going to make sure that K3 is going to start only when K1 is going to be over. All right. So if you don't have any questions, I might ask you to do something. Okay. So one of the things that events help us with is what you have already used, and that is to record the time. So I have event record. Yeah, and on the previous slide, I have not mentioned this, but this stream A is a stream. If you don't specify this particular stream, I think you specify 0 is what is, yeah. So this 0 is the default stream. So since K is going to go into the default stream, you can have the starting of the timer. So you record that, and then you also record another event, and the diff between the two events is going to give you some elapsed time. So that is also mentioned as one of the APIs in CUDA, where you specify those two events and then get the elapsed time in as a double. Right, and the important part here is CUDA device synchronize. Otherwise, you will get only the kernel launch time rather than the kernel execution time. Hold on, just a minute. Yeah, there seems to be a small difference between the two. Here, I have not given CUDA device synchronize after K1. whereas we know that CUDA device synchronize is required. Otherwise, you will record only the launch time. So, is CUDA device synchronize required here? Or at least CUDA stream synchronize, which will synchronize with stream A. Otherwise, will it record only the launch? Okay, I think this needs to be checked. So the question that I have is, we have not specified CUDA stream synchronize after K1. So whether this event this is going to get generated just after kernel K1 launch, or it is going to wait for the kernel to get over, that I am not sure. Definitely, if you have CUDA stream synchronize, this code will work and it will make sure that K1 completes before K3. But if you don't have it, whether it will wait, that I don't know. My guess is it will not wait. The event will get generated as soon as K1 gets launched, and therefore K1 and K3 might execute in parallel. This is my current guess, but that needs to be checked. Yeah, this example I have taken from a particular website, but let's yeah, I have probably not, maybe I have tried it also, but probably I didn't realize the this issue. Okay, but yeah, for safety sake, we'll say that there is a CUDA stream synchronize here, right? Even if you add CUDA device synchronize, in this case, it's not going to hurt, because that is going to be, there is only one stream which is active at this stage. Does that seem reasonable? Any suggestions here? Any concerns? All right, so let's do some classwork. So what we are going to do is to have a parent stream, right? I mean, there is no such thing as parent stream. All streams are equal, except for the default stream, of course. But let's assume that there are named streams. So there are n+1 named streams. One of them is a parent stream and n child streams. Why these are called parent streams and child streams is because the parent stream is going to enqueue work, preamble and postamble. So there are some tasks which need to do by these n child streams in parallel. As far as parent is concerned, what it is going to do is it's going to enqueue preamble and enqueue postamble. The preamble must finish before any of the child streams start their work, and the postamble must start after all the works from all the streams, all the child streams is over. So there is a, in some sense, there is this scatter or fork which is happening, and then there is a gather or a join which is happening as far as stream works is concerned. This is preamble, right? This is postamble, and this is where the child streams are going to perform the work, right? So I want this kind of processing to be done. So can you use events to create such a process? So any suggestions on how this code will go? I'll wait for a few seconds. You can write your pseudocode or suggest if you have any difficulty or if there are any concerns. Okay, I'm hoping that you are trying. One question I'll ask is how many CUDA event record I need in this process.
N+1.
Okay, Shade says n+1. Any other suggestions?
So, sir, we can use one record for the just after the preamble that will trigger all the end children's. So all of them will be waiting on this one event.
Okay.
And they'll start execution. After all of the children finish execution, each of them will put one event record each, on which the post-amble will be waiting. So once all of these n waits are completed, then the post-amble can execute.
Okay. That logic seems to be correct, that you have one event generated as soon as preamble is over, but that event needs to be so that is generated by the parent stream, and all the child streams are going to wait for that event. All the n child streams are going to wait for that particular event.
Yes, yes.
Right. Yeah, and then the there is another. All of these child streams are going to finish their work and then generate n different events. All these n different events need to be waited for by the post-amble. So that will make sure that you have this fork or scatter and then join or gather. So let's look at that code. I'm just assuming n to be some arbitrary value, doesn't matter. So you have this parent stream and then there are child streams. Note that I require large number of child streams. And then there is a parent event and then there are child events. These are the events that Shade was talking about, n+1. The parent is going to generate this parent event after preamble, and child events are going to get generated after each child finishes its work. So the preamble goes into the parent stream, work goes into the child stream of I, and the post-amble again goes into the parent stream. Now we have to set up the events. So I create the parent event, I push it into the parent event after, into the parent stream after preamble is over, and each child from 0 to n is going to wait for that event, parent event, in that particular child stream. Right? So this is taking care of the upper part of our dependency diagram. After the work is over, the CUDA event record is going to create a child event, right, in the particular child stream. So here also I have not used, or rather this website has not used CUDA device synchronize after work. So maybe it works out that way. Yeah, most probably this works out without CUDA device synchronize or CUDA stream synchronize in this case. All right, so this child stream works, the child event gets created for the n child streams after they perform their own work. And I need to wait in the, for this, the parent needs to wait for this child event of I in the parent stream, right? Like the child was waiting for the parent event in the child stream. Similarly, the parent needs to wait for the child event in the parent stream. And then there is a post-amble only after that, and that is going to make sure that the post-amble happens after each of the works is finished by the n threads, n child streams. Any concerns, questions on this one? Okay, so we'll move ahead from here. So whatever we discussed as part of this these slides is we looked at concurrent computation using streams. Then we also tried to overlap communication and computation. We also looked at cooperation across kernels where they wanted to do some work together when there are multiple grids active at the same time. We looked at callbacks, which was intra-stream synchronization, and we looked at events, which was inter-stream synchronization. Okay, so let's move on to possibly the final topic, which is anyway the topics part.
So,
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about this events. Is there any way to like attach some sort of data to the event also, so that whichever stream gets notified, it'll have some access. It'll have access to some sort of data.
I see. I see. Yeah. So by default, the streams will not have. I mean, the API doesn't specify that. However, since the communication is going to happen across two tasks which are there in the two different streams, you can have a kernel. Let's say I have K1 in one stream and K3 in the other stream. K1 can write to a global memory on the GPU, and K3 can read from that global memory on the GPU. So you won't have a specific data structure which gets passed, similar to the callback that we had. But if you have pre-decided that stream 0's information is going to be in global variable x0 and stream 1's in x1 and so on, then x0 can be written by K1 in stream 0, and the K3 in the other stream can read from x0. Right? So that is possible.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. So let me reshare the screen. Any other questions on the previous set of slides? Okay, so these are some of the topics that you might encounter, let's say in your project or if you do some other work. And these are some of the other, in some sense, advanced concepts which can be helpful in some situations. So, yeah, so let's see. These are kind of additional optimizations in some sense that you can do, but you need to be a little careful, especially about this dynamic parallelism. So let's look at some of these aspects in the remaining part of the course. Okay, so the dynamic parallelism that we have also discussed about is that can you call a kernel from inside a kernel, which is essentially driven by nested parallelism, which might be present in your code. So you have this for loop I and then for loop j, and what you want to do is that you parallelize only the outer for loop, and then the kernel that you have written so far will have that for j inside the kernel, which means that each thread is going over that j. Instead, isn't it possible that instead of having that for loop, I launch another kernel from inside the each thread itself? So the each thread now becomes a parent, and it is going to generate a different kernel for its own inner j loop. Well, although this looks very natural and nice, because of some of the overheads involved, it's not advisable to use dynamic parallelism in this situation. If you have for I and for j loops and you know their bounds, it is probably better. For example, you have a matrix computation. Right? It's better to launch, let's say, n into m number of threads directly in the outer loop itself. So you essentially merge I and j loops and launch the number of threads such that you just take care of that by n into m number of threads, where n is the bound of I and m is the bound of j. And that doesn't require any dynamic parallelism. Right? This is something which we did when we were doing matrix multiplication in the initial setup, where we tried to parallelize on the I loop, then we tried to parallelize I and j loop, etc. Right? So this was just a single kernel call. Right? There was no nesting of kernel calls. Dynamic parallelism is useful when your inner j loop has different bound for different values of I. And that means that for I equal to 0, you are going to have 10 number of iterations. For I equal to 10, you are probably going to have 5 number of iterations. I equal to 20, you are going to have 9 number of iterations. And this cannot be deduced at compile time. Right? So in such cases, you can, and these cases are a little rare. Rare meaning, in usual scientific computation, you won't encounter such situations. But when you have sparse data, for example, you are talking about a graph or a sparse matrix, then the outer I loop might go over all the nodes in the network, right? And the inner J loop might go over the neighbors of I, which can differ depending upon how your underlying network is. For example, if it would have been a grid, a uniform grid, then the number of neighbors of each node is going to be more or less fixed. It is going to be 4 if it's a 2D grid, and at the boundary it is going to be let's say 1 or 2. So that is not really a reason to use dynamic parallelism. Instead, if you have, let's say you are working on some sort of a social network, or you are doing some page rank calculation, etc., or shortest path computation, at that time dynamic parallelism can be helpful, but you should know about the overheads as we discuss further, right? So this is what I was talking about, that you have a for loop on I and then for loop on J, which is a function of I, which is not really some arbitrary or compile time derivable entity. Right? This can happen in multiple places. For example, you have these hierarchical data structures, right, which could be not specifically k-array trees. In k-array trees, the fan out is going to be fixed k, but if you have a varying number of neighbors whose bound can be k, but the k can be large, and therefore the variation can be large. In such cases, you can use dynamic parallelism. Algorithms which naturally need to be modeled using recursion, for example, many of the tree traversals, graph traversals, or manipulations, we use recursion, right, on CPU. Such can be nicely modeled, or these are natural candidates for using dynamic parallelism. And algorithms where work naturally splits into independent batches of work, and each batch can be independently parallelly processed, right? So in such cases, you can have, for example, there is some work that needs to be done across each department, right? So there is an I loop on the departments, and then within each department, the amount of work depends upon the number of students in that department, which can vary considerably. So in such cases also, parallelism, nested parallelism or dynamic parallelism can be helpful. Yeah, so as I started with a little bit of caution, not all nested parallel loops need dynamic parallelism. If those can be merged, I and J loops can be merged, for example, here, like simple matrix computation, then you don't need really dynamic parallelism. So how do you do that? Well, the syntax is exactly similar to what happens in our host side. So we have this parent kernel, which launches with one thread block, 3 threads within that block, and then CUDA device synchronize. Within the parent, I print and then just call a child. Child with single block and 5 number of threads and so on, right? So, and the child gets the ID of its parent thread. Well, this is maybe a male chauvinistic view. I need not call it father, maybe it should be called as a mother or maybe just a parent. But anyway, so, and each child prints what its parent is and so on. Right. So what will be the answer to, what will be the output of this code?
Zero, 1, 2 cross 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Like there will be 15 entries, right?
Okay. So the 3 parents are going to print parent 0, 1, 2. right? And then for each parent, we might get the child whose ID will also change from 0 to 4, and therefore we'll get those 15 entries for this printf, and 3 entries for this printf, right? So, but unfortunately, this has anybody tried nested parallelism so far?
Sir, I tried, but it was giving error, like it is not supported by the CUDA version.
Okay.
You should pass a separate flag.
Should be changed or something.
Okay.
You just pass a separate flag and specify the actual compute capability.
Okay. So let's understand what Niranjan is saying. So I also try to compile, let's say, this code, and I get this error that calling, nested parallelism or dynamic parallelism is only allowed on the compute 35 architecture or above, right? Which means that we have to specify the compute capability of the GPU. By default, it might just take compute underscore 20 or so, that means 2.0. So I specify SM underscore 35 or SM underscore 60 or 70, whatever is your GPU capable of. Unfortunately, that also doesn't work, right? So it gives a different error, which requires something called as separate compilation, right? So that is something which is about the specificity of what happens with respect to the kernel code versus the host code, and we need to give that flag whenever you have compilation of the PTX assembly within the kernel code. PTX is the assembly code for CUDA, so that needs to be specified, and that is what Venkat Sai Venkat Kochal was talking about. So that requires this flag -RDC equal to true to be given. And once we give that, then the code compiles correctly, and when you do a dot out, then we see whatever was our expected output. Now the question is, will this code always produce exactly the same output? Well, that is not guaranteed. I mean, although those 0, 1, 2 for these 15 can appear in any order, although that is going to be a same warp, so those colors will always appear together. As far as 0, 1, 2 is concerned, that is also going to be together because it's the same warp of the parent. Yeah, and only after parent 0 is printed, then only its child is going to start, and therefore there will be a sequential dependence between the two. So, and therefore parent 1 and this purple color and blue color will never have different ordering amongst them because they belong to the same warp, and there is a sequential dependence from parent 0 to parent 0 child 0. So yeah, so that is the output that we get. So just remember that -RDC equal to true flag. Okay, the question is, what will be the output of this code? What I have is, again, well, some number of threads, let's say 10. K is initialized to 2, and if thread ID mod K is 0, that is 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, then only I am launching a child kernel. And yeah, so what will be the output of this code? And then printing father plus thread ID in the child, and in the parent I print this only when I launch the kernel, child kernel, otherwise I don't print anything. So any suggestions on what will get printed?
So here also the printf won't wait for the child kernel to finish, right? In the parent.
Right. So what do we expect with respect to the child kernel launch and the printf? Is this asynchronous, or does the parent wait for the child to get over? So in this case also the parent can run in concurrence with the child, right? Which means that this printf can get executed out of order with respect to the child's printf, right? So that is possible. Otherwise we have to give CUDA device synchronize. CUDA, hold on. I'll confirm that. I think I have it mentioned. That is what is my current feeling, but I'll confirm that on probably on a couple of slides.
Sir, can we use sync threads?
Can we use sync threads? Yes, you can use sync threads.
Like sync threads to make the child kernel stop executing. Like waiting till the child kernel executes.
Okay, let's understand that. So the question here was, can we use sync threads here, right, between child and printf? If you use sync threads is going to coordinate with respect to the other parents in the same block, that is the other threads in the same block. In fact, according to our theoretical reasoning, we should not use sync threads inside the if, but assume that that if is not there. It will synchronize across these 10 threads of the same thread block. And what does that mean? That means that all the children of all the parents are going to finish launching of the child to make sure and meet there and then execute the printf. But this will not ensure that the printf of the child will be over before the printf of the parent is called. Right? So sync threads is not going to ensure the execution of child, it will just ensure the launching of the child. This is what is my current understanding, which I will confirm in a couple of slides.
Sir, so when a parent launches a child kernel, all those kernels get pushed to the same stream, right?
So that is something which we have to worry about a little more. It's not exactly the same. Yes, by default they are going to go into the same stream, but there is slightly more to it, which is related to thread blocks, and that we are going to study when we reach there. But yes, in this example they are all going to go to the same stream. And Sai Chaitanya has said that the output will turn out to be 0, 1. Okay, so let's see that. So let's talk about parent 0 first, right? So parent 0, this condition is true. 1, 3, 5, 7, 9 are not going to print anything, so we'll ignore those. That parent 0 is going to launch the child with 2 threads, right? Launch the child kernel with 2 threads, whose IDs are going to be independently 0 and 1, right? And their parent or the father ID is going to be 0, right? So that will print 0 and 1 for that child. And the parent 0 is going to say call children with starting 0, right? And similarly call children, sorry, there is a typo here, call children with starting 2, 4, 6, 8, and then that parent ID is going to get added to this 0 and 1. This thread ID x.x is always going to be 0 and 1. So we'll see 0 and 1 getting added to 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, right? So that is what I anticipate the output to be. Is that understanding correct, or there is some issue? Mohit says, if parent contains 2 child kernel calls, will one child wait for another? If we make 2 kernel calls from CPU, they execute sequentially. Yes. So if they are going into the same stream, then there is going to be sequential execution of the 2 child kernels, which is happening from the same parent. Yes, that is correct. So the second child will wait for the first to finish. That is correct.
Sir?
Yeah, Niranjan.
Suppose we even try to like wait using CDS or something else for the child kernels, then won't the stream get stalled? Because the children are waiting for the parent to finish because they're in the same stream. And the parent, the CUDA device synchronize is going to wait for the entire stream to finish.
Yeah, so I will have to see how it works out. I think I have forgotten what is there on the next slide. Whether the parent child, but I think parent does execute in parallel to this. I think the default stream for the children is, I think, different from the default stream of the parent. And I think it doesn't go into the same stream, and therefore the parent can execute some printfs in parallel, or execute in parallel with the child stream. And even if you add CUDA device synchronize, it doesn't cause an issue because that default stream is different for the parent and the child kernels. So that is what I recall, and therefore by adding CUDA device synchronize, you will be able to make sure that the children complete their execution and still not cause any issue with the parent, right? That's what I remember, but I'll confirm this. Right? I think the discussion further will make it clear. Yeah. Any other concerns, questions here? Parent waits for children to complete its task. That's what Krishna Vamsi is suggesting. So I think I'll have to check this. I'm not sure. I think that the parent goes in parallel, but let's come to that. Okay, so right. So as far as parents are concerned, those are going to print 02468. As far as the children are concerned, those are going to add their parent's ID to their 01. Right? So therefore, you are going to see this output written by two threads of the same, two, let's say, siblings of the same parent. Right? So this output seems to be in line with what we anticipate. But more importantly, let's come to this question of whether the parent is going to by default wait for the print. If that happened, then this 2-3 would have been printed before this particular statement would have been printed, right? And that is not happening, and this indicates that the parent and the children kernels are actually executing concurrently with each other, right? Does that seem reasonable, Krishna Vamsi and Niranjan?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so this output, I got actual output from my GPU, right? So this does indicate that the parent is by default going to execute in parallel to the children kernels. Any other concerns here? But definitely there is something which is going to be peculiar about something about the thread blocks, which we are going to come a little later, but let's understand this part first. So Krishna Vamsi doesn't seem to be satisfied, but we'll come to, if he has any question, we'll come to that. Okay, so as far as, okay, so let's talk about this. The parent kernel is associated with a different grid, and each child kernel is associated with a different grid. So if you launch one child, then that is going to be a different grid. If each thread is launching different kernel, then each kernel is going to be associated with different child grids. Not all of them might be active at the same time. Right? And the parent and child kernels may execute asynchronously. This is what our observation is, and this is what the documentation says. A parent grid is not complete unless all its children have completed. This is where that waiting, which probably Krishna Vamsi is trying to suggest, is that you cannot complete the parent kernel until all its 4 children, and not only direct children, but let's say grandchildren, etc., all of those are over, and until then this particular kernel cannot return to its parent, right? In the outermost part, this parent is going to be the host, whereas for somebody in between, the parent might turn out to be another kernel, right? So this is where that waiting happens. But as far as execution of the kernel happens, that happens concurrently with the child. Does that seem reasonable, Krishna Vamsi? Okay. Any other concerns here? So this part is related to the computation part. I'm going to discuss the parts related to dynamic parallelism also in 3 parts, similar to our course, where one is computation, another is memory, and another is synchronization. So we'll discuss these 3 in 3 different parts. So this is about the computation part. Let's talk about the memory. Parents and children, they share the global memory, right? As well as other memories like constant and texture. But as far as local memories and shared memories are concerned, those are not shared from parent to children or from children to parent. Right? So this should be understood. So as far as global data is concerned, all the grids have access to it, whether it's a parent grid or a child grid, or whether that is a grid in a separate stream. All of that, they share the global memory, which is CUDA-malloc or using malloc and so on. But as far as the local memory, local threads, individual threads might create something on the stack. It is not correct to share its address. You can share the value with the child, but not its address. So I'll give you one small example on the next slide. All the global memory operations in the parent. So what all goes from parent to the child is that all the memory, global memory operations in the parent before the child gets launched are visible to the child. Right? That makes sense, right? So this is something related to do memory consistency, that when I'm launching a child, what all does it inherit from the parent? This is not inheritance really, but what all is visible from the parent to the child. So the global memory operations which have finished, those are going to be accessible to the child. Whatever is happening in parallel to the child, that may be visible, may not be visible, depending upon the order in which the memory operations happen. Right? That also seems reasonable. And if there are any global memory operations in the child, those are also going to be visible to the parent only after the parent explicitly or implicitly synchronizes with the child's completion. Right? How does that happen? Well, CUDA device synchronize or some such API call can help the parent synchronize with the child, and that will make sure that the child's whatever were the updates, those are pushed back to the global memory, and those are going to be visible. It also is an onus on the parent kernel to actually read from the global memory. Right? So if it is reading from the local cache, then that data is going to be visible, that changes are going to be visible from the child kernels to the parent kernels, but the parent might still read the local value. That is also possible. Right? So this visibility means that it is accessible. Whether it reads or not, that depends upon whether there is a thread fence before reading the value, or whether it is volatile, etc. That variable is volatile, etc. So our discussion about synchronization all is going to come into play here also, exactly in a similar manner. Any questions on this part? I'll just show you one small example. For example, if there is a host launch, let's assume it to be some main, which has some data passed in, which is a CUDA-malloc variable. I'm creating a parent launch kernel with a single thread block, and I'm passing that data as a parameter, and I'm doing CDS on the host. In the parent launch, this is a GPU data. I have assigned, let's say, some ID to this data of threadidx.x. Right? This is CUDA-malloc data. And after that, I have sync threads. Right? This sync threads is going to make sure that this is over for all the threads within that thread block. And then thread ID 0 is going to launch a child kernel. None of the other threads are, now the other 255 threads are going to launch the child kernel, to which I am passing this global data. What does this child launch do? It just increments that particular variable corresponding to its own thread ID. Right? So since the number of threads in the child are also going to be 256, it has the complete data available with it, and it can do it. Then there is a CUDA device synchronize after the child for this, and then there is a sync threads here. Right? So what can you say about okay, so let me first understand this. So this is going to make sure that this data writing is going to be visible to this reading of data of thread id x.x, right? So 0 to 255 parent threads are going to write to this data, and 0 to 255 threads of the child kernel launched only by the parent 0 are going to be accessing this. And because of this sync threads, it's going to be made sure that this writing by the parent is going to be visible to the children in the nested kernel. And because of the CUDA device synchronize, it is also going to be made sure that the parent waits, that is the child 0 is going, the parent 0 is going to wait for child launch to be over. And then after the sync threads, it's going to be also visible. All this data that was written by the children, updated by the children, is going to be visible to the parents. The question here is, if I remove sync threads, then what is the answer to this? What happens? What is the change that happens? Any suggestions? And we'll stop there. Okay, so maybe what we'll do is we'll stop here, and I'll give you 24 hours or 22 hours to think about this question, and we'll discuss at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. All right, see you then. Bye. Updates. Okay, Shagnik is saying updates to data may not be seen in parent. I think that is a correct answer, but partially correct answer. There is something more, some customization is required there. Okay, so if there are no further answers, I'll stop.